Arlington National Cemetery, Washington, and the final resting place of one of America's greatest heroes. Each year, 3.5 million people pay homage at this shrine to the memory of President John F. Kennedy. They also come to ponder one of the greatest murder mysteries of all time.
There was a monstrous cover-up of everything. I know it, and so do the people who covered it up.
It angers me terribly that we don't know the truth. And the arrogance of those in power that continue the cover-up and the lie is beyond tolerance.
We're not a free country anymore because the people who are smart enough and powerful enough to take out a president like that and get away with it for 25 years are probably involved in other areas of the government. In other words, the country is being run by people we did not vote for.
If it could be done to John F. Kennedy in 1963, it could be done to another president in the future. And we can't afford to have coups d'etats in America, no matter how cleverly orchestrated and sinisterly contrived they may be. That cannot be permitted to happen. And the way in which you prevent that from happening is to expose those elements of government and society in this country that were responsible for the killing of John F. Kennedy.
The southeast corner window of the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, Dallas. According to the official verdict, the spot where a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, fired 3 shots into Dealey Plaza, striking the president from behind as he rode in a motorcade down the center of Elm Street. And each year on November the 22nd, an informal gathering on the grassy knoll of people skeptical of their government's conclusion.
And in honor of the events that took place here in November 1963. One moment, please.
Until now, the world has been asked to accept the Warren Commission's verdict on the death of John F. Kennedy. New evidence that exposes the complex and sinister forces that brutally murdered the President of the United States 25 years ago will be shown here for the first time. President Kennedy's last day began at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast in Fort Worth. In his entourage were Vice President Lyndon Johnson and the Governor of Texas, John Connally.
Basically, his purpose for his visit to Texas, it was not just to Dallas, was to raise money for himself and for the Democratic Party, and also to enhance his standing, because he was looking forward to the election in 1964.
Couldn't let you leave Fort Worth without providing you with some protection against the rain.
I'll put it on in the White House on Monday. If you'll come up there, you'll have a chance to see it there.
His second engagement of the day was a luncheon in Dallas, a 6-minute flight away on Air Force One.
And now the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace both now and forever. Amen.
From the dark, overcast, the drizzling rain of Fort Worth to the bright sunshine when we landed at Love Field in Dallas, it promised to be an absolutely spectacular day for the President, for the Vice President, for me. I was Governor of the state. Ms. Connally and I rode in the car with the President and Mrs. Kennedy. He got a very, very warm reception. The schools had turned out. The school children were lining the street by the thousands. They were applauding, and it was a very happy, joyful occasion, really.
2 cars back from the presidential limousine was Senator Ralph Yarborough with Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson.
As we approached the city and then finally turned down Main Street toward the Trinity River, the crowd increased as we got to the heart of Dallas. And it's one of the most enthusiastic crowds I saw in any city we were in Texas on that tour. That's on the sidewalks. Now, if you looked up in the upper stories, I never saw a single smile at any window I looked at. Some looked down, and looked like with dislike on the faces.
Nellie turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, you can't say now that they don't love you here in Dallas." And within a matter of a few seconds after that, we turned on Elm Street to go down to get on the Stemmons Freeway to go out to the Trade Mart where the luncheon was being held. And that's when the shots occurred. I heard what I thought was a rifle shot. I immediately reacted by turning to look over my right shoulder because that's where the sound came from. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary and was in the process of turning to look over my left shoulder when I felt a blow in the middle of my back, as if someone had hit me with a doubled up fist, about like that. The blow was of such force that it bent me over, and I immediately saw that I was covered with blood. And I knew I'd been hit. And I said, "Oh my God, they're going to kill us all." And I heard another shot that was a loud shot almost like that. And immediately I saw blood and brain tissue all over the back of the limousine. I knew then that the president had been fatally hit because Ms. Kennedy then, I heard her say, "My God, I've got his brains in my hand."
The Secret Service in the car in front of us kind of casually looked around, looked up at the back of them and rather slow to react. And we went under the underpass, and as we came up on the other side, I could see then the president's car, and there was Hill, whom I knew as a Secret Service man assigned to protect Mrs. Kennedy. He was lying across the back to hang on with the arm over in there so he could hang on at that high speed. His face turned back towards us, just writhed in agony and beating with his hand on there like a terrible thing has happened. I knew then that Kennedy had been shot. And within several minutes, we came to Parkland Hospital, and the Secret Service immediately jumped out the minute Johnson said they practically pulled him out and formed a cordon around him, 4 or 5, and one of them said, "Mr. President." I knew then Kennedy was dead, and I walked up to the car where Mrs. Kennedy was still there on the back seat, lying there with her head bowed over, covering her husband's head, his blood running down her leg and on her clothes, and twice saying, "They've murdered my husband. They've murdered my husband." It's the most tragic sight of my life.
While the senator wept for his president, inside Parkland Hospital, doctors battled to resuscitate him in Trauma Room 1.
My most vivid impression of the entire agitated scene was that his head had been almost destroyed. The face was intact but very swollen, and it was obvious that he had had a massive wound to his head.
We decided that the president was dead, and Dr. Clark, the chairman of neurosurgery, had come in the meantime, and he had walked up to the head of the patient and looked inside at the wound and shook his head.
President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound in the brain. Dr. Berkeley told me it's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head.
On duty at Parkland throughout these events was Aubrey Reich, an ambulance driver for the O'Neill Funeral Home. He was approached by the Secret Service.
They told us to go into the trauma room and prepare the president to be moved. And had his head wrapped in sheets. I, at the time, didn't know where he had been shot or what, and we was all very sad, everybody's choking back tears. But
Dr. Earl Rose was a forensic pathologist, well trained in medical legal autopsies, and he appeared at Trauma 1 and said, "This is a homicide in Dallas County, and I will do the autopsy on President Kennedy." In the meantime, a casket had been acquired and the president's body had been placed in it, and he was informed by the Secret Service that if he didn't get out of the way, he would be run over by the casket as they were leaving. This was the President of the United States, and they were taking him back to Washington.
There was a lot of cursing going on. I was embarrassed, especially for Miss Kennedy, because she was standing right behind us. The priest was there. A lot of what I thought was, was too foul of language to be going on. It was a terrifying type thing. It's hard to believe, that grown people could be so childish about things, and everyone trying to take over.
Vice President Johnson had already left for the airport, shortly to be followed by Jackie Kennedy with her husband's body. The casket was manhandled up the steps of Air Force One. Minutes later, Johnson was sworn in as the new president. Barely 3 hours after arriving in Dallas, the plane left for Washington. In Dealey Plaza, in the chaos immediately after the shooting, there'd been confusion about where the shots had come from. Over 50 known eyewitnesses believed that there was a gunman up on the grassy knoll, but the police quickly focused their attention on the book depository. The police were in the building within 90 seconds. In the southeast corner of the 6th floor, 3 spent cartridges were found lying closely together against the wall, near a half-open window that overlooked the motorcade route. Later, a rifle was found on the same floor by Deputy Sheriff Eugene Boone.
In the far corner of the stairwell, you could not see this corner of the building at all from the stairwell. That's where I found the rifle, over in the northwest corner of the building.